to Prism, podcast of the University of the Philippines College of Architecture. The Prism project is an electronic newsletter published by the gender team at the University of the Philippines College of Architecture, published 3 times every semester. It informs UP College of Architecture faculty, staff, and students of relevant developments, updates, events, and news concerning gender equality and women's empowerment in our community, profession, and extension work. The gender team also shares best practices of the work of colleagues and students. No matter who you are or the color of your skin, you are welcome in Prism. This is Sarah Musabi, and I would like to invite you to listen in on our 5th Women's Month 2023 podcast with myself, Xander, and Dr. Grace Ramos. Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Prism Podcast. I am Sarah Musabi, your gender and development focal point for the College of Architecture at the University of the Philippines. I would like to welcome you to our Women's Month podcast 2023 to celebrate everything about women. Hopefully, you'll have new and interesting insights into the empowerment of women in today's world. And today, we have with us Xantel Luxon from our very own UPCA gender team and Dr. Grace Ramos, former Dean of UPCA. Good afternoon, Dean Grace, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting.
Hi, Xander. Good afternoon. I hope you guys you all had a great day. Now I pass you to Xander. Hi, Xander.
Hi, Sarah. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me today to talk to our former Dean of UPCA, Dr. Grace Ramos. Hi, Ma'am Grace. Kamusta po sila today? How was your day po today?
Hello. Just like other days, very, very busy.
Just wanted to ask, are your days probably presumably less busier than the last 3 years? How has your last 3 years been po?
The last 3 years, as you know, have been extremely difficult. But as just like everyone, I'd like to believe that I became a better person because of all the difficulties that we all had to go through.
That's so good to hear, ma'am. And we'd also really want to take this opportunity to thank you for your service for the last 3 years as our dean. Thank you very much, po, Dean Grace. Ma'am
Yes,
Grace,
thank you.
wanted to ask, yes, po. Ma'am Grace, just wanted to ask, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how has your career been in the last 10, 20 or so years?
Okay. My very first job was with UP College of Architecture. I was a research assistant straight out of college. And then I also became an apprentice under one of our esteemed professors, Professor Hong. After that, I joined a government corporation, and that was how my career got channeled towards housing issues. So that's where the specialization in planning that involved mostly housing started. And then I started teaching in the College of Architecture in the late 90s. I've been teaching for almost 3 decades now.
Well, ma'am, that's really a long spanning career. Would you like to tell us more about any insights on the differences between working for the public sector and the private sector, po, Ma'am Grace?
Very different in terms of scope and content. I'd like to believe working with government would offer you a very wide array of opportunities to learn. because you don't get to handle just one small pie of the project. You're introduced to so many aspects of it. You get to talk to different people from all walks of life. But the challenges are the same in the sense that you are expected to adhere to standards of ethics and, of course, the expected competencies and different groups of people. I would say, like in government, I was working mainly with developers, landowners, that being a housing agency, and then with private, I was working directly with clients, smaller groups of people, families even, and with planning, I'm also into city planning, and I've been working with local government officials, mayors, councilors, and all the stakeholders in cities.
And ma'am, were there any differences with the way your career has been both in the public and private sector in terms of being a woman architect, ma'am?
I would say that the challenges came not solely from my being a woman, but it was a combination of so many things, and gender, of course, was one of them. There were other attributes of myself that factored into the equation, and whether I'd be promoted or be given the more challenging work, everything, age, educational background, and the challenges that I experienced as I was studying abroad, dealing with different people from other culture, would even present other challenges because of me being a Filipino, and in some cases, me being a Catholic. So there are many sources of biases, prejudices, and being a woman is just one slice of the big pie of all the challenges that you need to overcome.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing that. The reason, of course, as you know, why we are here today is because we are dedicating this podcast episode as part of the series of the Gender and Development Committee, or the gender team led by Sarah for UPCA, for Women's Month. And so we would like to ask you, what does Women's Month actually mean to you, po?
International Women's Month is just like any other special day marked on our calendars. Serves to remind us of something. It's a reminder that we should recognize diversity, that we're all different and we have special roles to play in the bigger schemes of things. And we need to understand how we will be fitting in to all of these systems of different cultures and beliefs, and even different advocacies.
Ma'am, just wanted to ask, although the answers or the responses might be obvious, but would you like to talk about what are the differences between being a woman in the academe versus being a woman in the design and construction sector?
Is being in the academe, I've actually been more into planning, city planning, rather than architectural design, although I did a few building design projects also. Okay, in the academe, particularly in University of the Philippines, I didn't get a chance to work outside of UP in terms of teaching. It's a government setup, and the good thing about it is everyone technically is a public servant, all the way up to the dean, all the way up to the UP president, right? So standards are quite set already, and we just need to adhere to all of those systems that are in place. So in terms of like getting promoted, there are systems being followed. So there's not much dog and cat fights, so to speak, in terms of getting ahead. There are very clearly laid out systems for that. In private, politics would be stronger determinant. There are challenges in terms of you being known, you getting to assert what you are proposing for certain projects. So social dynamics among between supervisors and the junior employees in the organization and between employees are very, very different.
And ma'am, what about how is it po in the private sector, especially in construction po as a woman po? Have you had any experiences?
Not too many negative experiences in terms of me, for example, not being able to assert my design concepts to clients and to co-workers. I really didn't get too much of that. Some of the horror stories, for example, in the field, in the construction site, luckily, I was able to get through quite easily.
So ma'am, this relates to our next question, which is, do any specific incidents come to mind if you have faced any barriers in your career as a woman? And if you did, how did you overcome the barriers?
So as I said, it's a confluence of so many factors. And the greatest challenges that I had to overcome were during the years when I lived and studied abroad. So I studied for 1 year for my master's in Europe. And then I stayed 6 years in South Korea. So these were two different contexts in terms of me fitting in to a society, one being a very cosmopolitan city where it was relatively easy to fit in both as a Filipino and as a woman. South Korea was, as we know, just like Japan, could be more patriarchal. They're very closed societies. Even Koreans who studied abroad, returned, would find it difficult to fit in. But there were also challenges like staying in Europe, where the word Filipina was even, you can, some would tend to think of the word as a brand for a particular occupation. And being there in my 20s, trying to fit in, I had to exert more effort in raising the flag and proving that Filipinos can also be at par with other people coming from Europe and the United States, for example. So there, I had to exert more effort. And in South Asia, where, as we know, societies are more patriarchal, again, I have to prove that being a woman, living there alone in a different country would be, what do you call this? I had to assert to some extent my right to equal access to opportunities.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, just our last question before we go to, just to let you know, ma'am, that when we end the session, we will have a very short pop quiz for you. We hope tonight it's gonna be very fun. Don't worry. But just our last question po. We recall that when we asked you to write the foreword for our newsletter, you spoke about the relationships of space and gender. Would you like to take this opportunity to just talk a little bit more about that in a more informal setting such as this?
Okay. So we architects are trained to create the perfect vessel, the container where expected behavior would be hosted or accommodated. So whatever we see as outcomes in terms of activities being hosted in spaces, the built form would be manifestations of how we're able to foresee, and even our values would reflect our intentions in terms of accommodating people from different orientations. So as we are designing, as we are thinking of spaces to incorporate in buildings that we are designing, in my case, I've been doing more of city planning when we are allocating land uses for different functions. All these processes should take into account social relationships, organizations, how people are expected to behave and relate to each other. So even our biases, our prejudices will manifest and easily translate into all of the features of the spaces that we design.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your thoughts. Before again we go to the pop quiz, we'd like to end this session by asking you words of inspiration for all the women out there to whom this month is dedicated to.
We should acknowledge our strengths and weaknesses. I've never really been for the word equality, because to me diversity and equality just do not match. You cannot expect a diverse world that is also flat, meaning there are no hierarchies, no differences, no conflicts. We just need to respect and also be able to demand respect from people who may be biased against women. And the world will be a much interesting place to live in if we acknowledge as a baseline that we are really different and have special roles to play.
Thank you so much, Dr. Grace Ramos. And for our pop quiz, the question is, if you were given the chance, which three women of the world, whether they are still around or not, would you choose to have dinner with?
Dinner with Mother Teresa,
Wow.
Corazon Aquino,
Mhm.
and the mother of Jose Rizal.
Wow.
Thank you so much, our former Dean, Dr. Grace Ramos. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll pass it back on to Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Grace Ramos, for joining us today. And thank you, Xander, also. Thank you so much for this episode, and I will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
As Dr. Grace Ramos mentioned, Women's Month is a reminder that we should recognize diversity, that we are all different and we have special roles to play in it. And also we need to understand how we will be fitting in to all of these systems of different cultures, beliefs, and even different advocacies. I would like to invite all of you to join our gender theme. You can also contribute to Prism project newsletter and podcast for gender equality, equity, and the empowerment of women. I am Sarah, and I would like to invite you again to listen in next time.